Hi, everyone. How you doing? Having fun, yes. So I want to tell you all about what we're doing nowadays, what we're up to, the businesses I've started, but first it's important to go back. So I was 16 years old. I was working as a busboy at this little Italian restaurant in Grosse Pointe. Wasn't a very good busboy. I was making $4.25 an hour doing this job, and a friend of mine told me about this police auction where they'd sell these cars that were abandoned or people went to jail and they forgot about them, and they were selling them at like $200. And so I went with him. I was like, sure, I'll go see this spectacle, sure. And I had no intention of taking part in it, and I'm watching this thing go by, and this auctioneer is selling these cars. They're selling them for a few $1,000s, and I remember specifically this 91 Cutlass comes up, this red Cutlass, a terrible car. And nobody wanted to see this thing. They were all paying attention to the cars later on in the set. And the auctioneer goes, Cutlass, going once, $200. Going twice. And I just put my hand up. I was like, of course I will buy a car for $200. Driving a burgundy Aerostar that my grandma bought from her hairdresser. I was like, it's only up from here, you know. And so I bought this car, having no idea what to do with it, and I drag it back, and I know nothing about working on cars at this point. I knew nothing. I knew about putting plates in bins. And I started reading about, it didn't run right, it was dirty, it was terrible, and I got into fixing it. I made it my little project, and I cleaned it up, I put tires on it, I did all this work, and I put it on Craigslist, and I put it up for $1,200. And it sold the very next day. Somebody came by and was like, yes, I'll take it. And I remember specifically, I was living at home, of course, and I had the $1,200 in like 10s and 20s spread out on the bathroom counter of my mom's house. It was like my Scarface moment, and I was like, this is incredible. I realized that there was a way to disconnect the number of hours I put in and the amount of money I made. It would have taken me all summer to make that. And so I wanted to find more mechanisms like that. And so I started buying a few more of these cars, obviously quit as a busboy. And then I went to college. I went to Lawrence Tech to be a mechanical engineer. And no woo, you'll hear. And so I started going to Lawrence Tech, I'll say. And I tried. So I started buying these cars. I had a shop, a little shop I rented in Ferndale. I upgraded to a bigger one. And I got another one, and I'm still just doing these cars myself. I got a hangar at the Detroit City Airport. Turns out you can rent one if you ask for it. But I got kicked out by the FAA for non-aviational use. I was like, I'll eventually get a plane. It's a timeline thing, guys. And so they didn't want to hear it. I got the letter hand-delivered by a government employee. It was terrifying. And so I leave the airport, and I'm looking for another shop, and I'm working currently as a piston design engineer at this little company on the east side, and I was really good at the job. I wasn't really good at having a job. I didn't like I had some weird authority complex, so I made it an art to screw off at work. I elevated that to a science. I mean, it was beautiful. I would read online just anything for 6 hours a day and then get all my work done the last 2 hours. And it wasn't good for me. It wasn't good for my employer. If I employed somebody like this, I'd be super mad. And I quit there, and like I said, I had these shops, and I was looking, and I found this big building in Ferndale next to where I had my first shop. And it was, when you rent a big building, the cost per square foot gets a lot less. And so I was like, well, I'll get this big one, and all my friends will also have spaces in here, and we'll tinker on cars, and it'll be great. It'll be this thing, don't need to name it or anything. And everyone's, yes, all gung-ho, let's do it. And I signed the lease, and I have my name on the dotted line for all this money every month, and I said, no problem. And then all of my friends bailed. They just flat out bailed on the idea. They're like, I don't really need to do that right now. And I was terrified. I'm like, I'm responsible for this place, and I have no appreciable income to pay for this huge lease. And so I'm sitting at my computer one night, and I'm on Craigslist. Everything goes back to Craigslist. I'm on Craigslist again, and I put up an ad. I say, business incubator. I was like, that sounds smart. Business incubator. Everyone has one now. They're like a toy, and so I say cheap offices, and I take the name from Fight Club. I call it Paper Street. I'm like, that sounds cool. And inside of 2 weeks, I had enough people that the thing made sense. People came from everywhere, and they said, office space is expensive. I don't need this big fancy thing. I'm on my couch right now. This is barely above that. Perfect. And I said, great. And that worked, and everybody started moving into this place, and we had it full up in a month. And Metro Mode does an article, and I've never been contacted by journalists before. They come by and they said, I want to do a story on your thing. And I said, great. And they do a story, and then the headline was, 22-year-old entrepreneur builds fertile ground for more entrepreneurs. And I said, entrepreneur? Ooh, that's a good one. I like that word. That's a $10 word. And so I kind of embraced it. I was like, entrepreneur, like, I guess I better start to do that. And so I do what any good aspiring entrepreneur does, and I started reading aphorisms, like little sayings. And what else are you going to do? I can't go to school. By the way, the people who cheered Lawrence Tech, I dropped out. I hated it there. So I couldn't stand it. And so I'm not in school. I'm doing these car things. I had Paper Street. And I'm reading all these little books and quotes. And you know all the quotes. You know, there's like I got a few for you here. There's Steve Jobs. You know, he says, I want to put a ding in the universe. And you're like, that? Yeah, I want to do that too. And then all lasting business is built on friendship. And you're like, yeah, that feels good. Hubbard said, do not take life too seriously. You'll never get out alive. And you're like, yeah, I want to be Mr. Fun businessman. I'm going to make $1 million. I'm gonna run a 2-minute mile, and I'm going to cure cancer. And you feel all jazzed up. But it's really not worth anything. It doesn't have any value because you don't know what they mean. And that's the cruel joke, is that you don't know what these things stand for without actually living through them. And so you get all jazzed up on these, but unless you go through with it and you have this execution and you do something, it doesn't really make any sense. So I still continue to collect these and become like a little expert on quotes. And it's 2010, so it's late 2010. I start this thing called the Thunderdrome, and some of you have heard about it. Yeah. So the story behind the Thunderdrome was not an easy one. It was not simple. My friend Ben and I, we heard about this Thunderdrome, this velodrome rather, the derived velodrome from Tom Nardone. You met him earlier. Awesome guy. He found it, and him and a couple people put a few days into cleaning it up. Did a lot of work to it. It still had trees growing out of the middle of it, and it was in really rough shape. And Ben and I go there, and we're really jazzed about it. And we said, this is great. This is a wonderful space. This is a really rare thing for a major metropolitan city to have a racetrack inside of it that nobody uses. And so we're sitting there, and we're like, we've got to do a race here. We've got to do an actual race. And we had no idea how to do such a thing. And so we just start digging. We went up to Kilburn's equipment rental, and we said, can we use that bulldozer thing? Just thinking, no way. And they're like, yeah, you're fixing a park? Sure, take it. And so I'm driving this thing. Ben, it's September, it's cold this year. Ben got trench foot from standing in water for a month straight. And it's this really grueling thing. And we're putting this race together, and then we got put on the cover of the Freep, and the Freep said, Renegade Rehabbers fix up velodrome. And I was like, that's really cool. And later that afternoon, we get a call from Parks and Rec. And Parks and Rec owns this thing. And they're like, what are you doing? And we're like, nothing. And so we're talking to them, and they said, you need a permit, you need insurance. And so we call insurance companies. We're like, we can do this. You know, I did this Paper Street thing. I'm bold enough. I got quotes in my pocket. And so and so we call these insurance companies, and the ones that do the motorized stuff, they're like, oh, well, you want to race bicycles there too? We don't do bicycles. I'm like, okay. So we call the bicycle insurance people, and they're like, oh, you have motorized things there? We don't do that. And so we call all these insurance companies. We finally found one, and they're like, yeah, we'll insure you for $1,000. And we're like, oh man, $1,000. I just started a business. I'm broke. Ben, he's working this job that he hates, so he really can't be a part of it like he needs to be to be able to put that kind of money down. And so we're just kind of dismayed, and we're sitting around, and I'm online with Ben, and Ben's like talking to me again. He's sending me stuff. He's like, I hate my job. And I realized it was my moment. I was like, I can turn him into a business person. It was like that scene in Star Wars. I was like, Ben, it's like, join me. Come to the broke side. Together we can rule nothing. And he was like, you know what do I got to lose? I hate this place. I'm out. And so he quits. He quits his job for this silly velodrome race thing, and we start doing it. And we're putting this track together. We're making the rules. We built the website. We had all these people jazzed up. And it's Thursday. The event's a Saturday. It's Thursday night. And we get this email at 9 p.m. We bought the insurance. We sent it in. We get this email from the head of Parks and Rec, like way up here. And I actually have the email here for you today. I'll never delete this email in my life. It says, good evening. I have not received the required information to approve this event on Saturday, October 16th on time. Please update this office regarding the other date. We will notify the Detroit Police Department and other agencies. Thank you. We have people flying in from around the country for this event, and we just got told we can't have the event because we didn't follow the guidelines that we didn't know existed. And so we are just completely heartbroken over this thing. We thought, how do we pull the plug? How do we end this? We don't want to get arrested. And so we're scheduled to go on Craig Folly the next morning, 10 a.m. You know, Craig is my guy, on WDET. And we were thinking, what are we going to say on the radio? We're going to say, oh, the event's canceled. That's it. It's done. And so we go to the studio. I'm all nervous, and I'm talking to them. And Craig, like clockwork, he's like, how has the city been on this? And I paused, and I was like, Craig, the city has been great. They have been super helpful with this. They have bent the rules for us, and they have helped us put this event on. And totally not believing it. And later that afternoon, an hour later, we get an email, just a one-line email. It says, you guys can put on your event. It's okay. And we're like, okay, cool. And so we put it on, and it was great. It was super successful. We had over 800 people show up. We had just under 90 racers. We had it be just $20 a person to sign up. Really great. We hold events there still. We take the proceeds, we put them back into the park. I help out with Tom and the mower gang. I am super duper out of time. I'll just tell you real quick. We went to start this bus company. It was exactly the same problem. We went to try to insure it. I was engaged in the transit conversation in 2011, and I looked at this thing and I said, you know, we need this train. We need this light rail. I really believe in light rail. I'm involved in lobbying for the RTA right now. And in January, I saw that the light rail, it's the FREEP on their blog. It said light rail is dead. And you can't throw your paper down like you used to be able to, so I like scrolled down real hard. And I'm mad, I'm real mad. And I felt this train was going to be a new age, and then these people can't get along, and we lost it at that point in time, and it's still tenuous. But I'm like, you know what? I'll do it. I can't do a train, but I can buy buses, and I will buy buses, and I will try to solve this issue piece by piece. I know I can't. I don't want to, and I can't compete with the public system. I don't need to, but I'm going to show that the purpose is there, that people want to go from the suburbs to the city, and they want to do it all hours of the day. That this has the demand that it needs, that people are saying it doesn't. And so I went to start this bus company, and I put the idea out there in the world, and I get on WXYZ, and I'm talking to Stephen Clark, and he's like, oh yeah, this bus company, and this is an example of good entrepreneurialism. There's that word again. And I have no idea how I'm going to do it. I have no idea like how one of these organizations run. And I go to get insurance. There's a theme here. And I call the insurance company, and they're like, what do you want to do? And I'm like, well, I want to have a bus, but it's private, and it's just $5 a person. And it goes from this spot to this spot to this spot, brings people downtown. And they're like, oh, insurance for that's $90,000 a bus a year. And I'm like, how? They're like, well, public systems are insured by the taxpayer. It's a pool, and so that's how it's handled. Nobody's ever tried this before, and so that's the price we have. And I was like, oh, okay, yep, no bus company. Like this is it. Like no way to pay that. And this the second Darth Vader joke of the night. I remembered back to Family Guy, and some of you remember this episode. Darth Vader is sitting there at the banking office, and he is. This has a point. He's sitting there at the banking office, and he goes, I need the money to build a space station that can destroy a planet with a giant laser. And the banker goes, no. And Darth Vader goes, I want to build a sports bar. And the banker goes, okay, here you go. And so I call back the insurance company. I'm like, I want to do a private bus that just happens to go from this bar in Royal Oak to this bar in Ferndale to this bar in Detroit. Because bars are a great bus stop. They're open all the time. They have food, booze. They're fun to meet at. And the insurance company goes, sure, yeah, that's no problem. Here you go. And it was totally affordable. And all of a sudden, I have a bus company. And so real quick, what I learned is that you have to call the world's bluff. This is my little quote that I defined over the years, is that nobody will tell you that you're allowed to do what you're going to do. You have to go out and do it yourself. This sounds corny in itself, but if you go forth and you try and you do it, you will learn that that is the way that it works. Steve Jobs ain't going to come down from his iCloud and tell you, this is your calling. You will become a bus company owner. You need to go forth and do it, and people will call you. Some guy called me stupid on the blogs, and I was like, why, yes, I am. I am that man. So that's it. I mean, you got to go out and you got to define those aphorisms for yourself. So thank you.